They were originally two wealthy young heirs, but their father forbade them from continuing their education and sent them to manage a remote ranch. However, the two brothers grew tired of it within just a couple of days, and even trivial chores like doing laundry had to be handled by themselves. So, under the instigation of their companions, they decided to capture some local indigenous people to serve as laborers on the ranch.
Like those blacks are wild beggars. You can't reason with them.
Soon after, several white men reached an agreement and arrived at the tribe armed with weapons to seize people. As soon as the indigenous people saw the intruders, they were terrified and scattered in all directions, yet some were still captured. At the same time, the indigenous people were not defenseless. They picked up wooden spears and were eager to fight back. The scene shifts to the brothers' old home in Brisbane. A maid unexpectedly discovers a stranger resting in the yard. Without understanding the situation, she steps forward to take a closer look, only to find an unfamiliar dark-skinned man. The maid is instantly overwhelmed with panic, and upon hearing her screams, the lady rushes to the upstairs window to check, only to realize it is an old friend she has not seen for many years. Ever since they parted at the ranch, 10 years have passed without a meeting, and both sides find it impossible to suppress their longing for each other. Soon after, Patsy prepares a lavish meal to entertain this friend from afar. The reason Buntamura appears now is because he has heard that Patsy's two sons have run into trouble. Being an indigenous man himself, he is willing to travel to the southwestern region of Australia to help the two young heirs manage the ranch. The lady feels deeply grateful for everything Buntamura has done for their family. At the same time, Patsy decides to travel with him to the Kimberley to find out what exactly has happened there. However, before setting off, he needs to meet with the bankers first, allowing Buntamura to enjoy the local cuisine. So Patsy takes his brother to the bank to discuss funding and land development plans. The map on the table is the urban planning layout of Brisbane, but in reality, it is used to explain how they can use city assets as collateral to secure bank loans and invest in the Kimberley Ranch. Patsy hopes to use this method to establish a large Kimberley Ranch group and build the largest pastoral empire in northwestern Australia. Therefore, they verbally confirm a loan agreement of £100,000, with the formal contract to be handled by his brother later. Meanwhile, he needs to hurry to the ranch with Buntamura, first, to determine the specific development plan of the ranch, and second, to resolve the troubles his two sons have fallen into. But the two young heirs were not informed in advance, and when they see their father arrive, they are filled with shock. In reality, the brothers feel afraid because they have done something wrong, and they fear being blamed once their father finds out. Soon after, Patsy offers his condolences to the victim's brother, believing they have suffered an attack from indigenous people, not knowing that his sons have not told him the truth at all. It is not until a remark from a nearby worker that,
"Hey! Don't go wandering around here on your own. We got better things to do than dig graves of blackfellas."
Pumpkin's a family friend, Michael.
Patsy realizes the situation is far more complicated than it seems. While their father walks around leading his horse, the brothers quickly urge the worker to stay silent, fearing that any revelation would lead to serious consequences. Meanwhile, a devastating disaster is about to unfold. After learning that Patsy has left home, the bank representatives take the initiative to meet with his brother to discuss the contract. They present a proposal that appears generous on the surface but is actually full of hidden risks. They offer to inject capital to help the Durack family develop the Kimberley Ranch in exchange for partial ownership and management rights of the land. In other words, this is not a simple loan, but a joint investment arrangement. On the surface it is assistance, but in reality it is a predatory deal. The bankers seize on Patsy's brother's lack of understanding of the hidden traps in financial terms, and by provoking him with the claim that he cannot make decisions without Patsy present, they push him to finally take charge for once and sign a contract worth as much as £600,000. And this marks the beginning of the downfall of the Durack family. Yet his wife seems somewhat dissatisfied with her husband's indecisiveness. Patsy and Buntamura wander through the Kimberley for a full 2 months without encountering a single indigenous person, until they accidentally come across a stretch of ruins in a valley, and the bullet holes piercing through the skulls make them realize that a massacre once took place here.
The police came. They led a party.
Were you in it?
The police advised us not to say.
Were you in it?
So which of these poor creatures murdered your cousin? This one? Maybe it was this one, huh? It's a child!
You came up here, you guarantee this would happen.
Oh, so it's my fault, is it?
You went to Thylunga with the best of intentions. Did you stop it from happening there?
No, I didn't.
No, this whole thing started when you came here to make a life and get away from the English.
We were starving!
But in coming here, you did to others what the English did to you. And by running from them, you've made their empire all the larger.
His son's words leave him unable to argue back, and cause Patsy's beliefs to collapse once again. That's right. The ranch massacre 10 years ago happened because of their involvement. Although many years have passed, it is unexpected that his sons now find themselves in exactly the same situation. Perhaps this is the ultimate reflection of the story. The triumph of civilization and the failure of humanity are often two sides of the same coin. Patsy can no longer calmly believe that his career is honorable, and it is time for him to leave the ranch. But this time Buntamura does not want to go back with him, choosing instead to stay behind. He believes the children there need care, and perhaps only with his presence can peaceful coexistence with the indigenous people be achieved. Patsy bids a heartfelt farewell to his old friend, and the friendship built between two men of different races seems to have long transcended the barriers of skin color and culture. On this land filled with uncertainty and challenge, the purest light of humanity shines, becoming the most precious bond in each other's lives. Before long, Patsy returns to his home in Brisbane, but the situation he faces is extremely dire. He rushes to the bank without stopping, only to find it crowded with citizens who have lost their investments. At the same time, the bank manager informs him that his family business has completely gone bankrupt, with total debts amounting to £600,000. Patsy had originally invested only £100,000, while the additional £500,000 was a loan his brother took out in his name while he was away. Now the real estate, the gold mines, the hotels, all resources and everything they owned are gone. After decades of hard work, Patsy loses everything overnight. For the first time in his life, this man past middle age feels utterly powerless, even his hands trembling. Fortunately, the land of the Kimberley Ranch had long been registered under his son's name, which might allow them to escape this financial crisis. Soon after, Patsy returns home in despair, and his wife has already learned the full story. Although he is filled with self-blame, Mary has never once complained about him. Those difficult years were endured together by the two of them. It is precisely because of those rare experiences that their bond has grown deeper, allowing them to continue forward without ever abandoning each other. But Patsy's other family members do not see it that way. When you have money, everyone crowds around you. When you have none, even your own siblings will point fingers and curse you. With this, Episode 7 of the series comes to an end. The King of Grass Treasure Episode 7 uses the cruel symmetry of sons inheriting their father's path to portray the generational transmission of colonial logic. The brothers' act of capturing indigenous people precisely replicates the violent patterns of the previous generation. Buntamura's return becomes a mirror reflecting conscience. More profoundly, the collusion between capital and colonial expansion is revealed, as the bank's trap brings down the family empire and exposes the fragility of primitive accumulation. Patsy loses everything once again, suggesting that the colonial enterprise will ultimately turn against itself. Meanwhile, Buntamura chooses to stay and protect the land, forming a sorrowful contrast to Patsy's departure. Those who truly belong to this land are never the ones who take from it, but the ones who protect it. This man has just learned that he is bankrupt, yet his lifelong partner chooses to stand by him without hesitation, because those difficult years were walked together by the two of them. But when Patsy walks into the inner room and faces the other family members, his sister-in-law is the first to step forward and accuse him. The woman looks fierce and aggressive, and it is only when the elderly matriarch intervenes that her emotions are temporarily calmed. Then the elderly matriarch clearly tells her daughter-in-law that Patsy is a man who loves taking risks, and it was his efforts that led everyone to prosperity. If you dislike people with a spirit of adventure, then you should never have married into the Durack family in the first place. When one person rises to success, even the chickens and dogs benefit. When one person falls into ruin, they are condemned by all. It was the younger brother's reckless decision to increase the investment behind his back that brought Patsy to such a miserable state. Now that things have reached this point, even Patsy's mansion no longer belongs to him. So after much hesitation, Sarah asks her brother and sister-in-law to stay at her house for the time being. But Mary understands clearly that when people are poor, living together is manageable. Yet now that times have changed, surviving under someone else's roof will only invite cold stares. So the couple decides to move to their son's ranch, believing this may be the best choice for everyone. The situation is now clear. The younger brother's family is unwilling to continue following Patsy. while the mother moves in with her eldest daughter. A family that rose from nothing and returned to nothing can now only go their separate ways. Life is always filled with regret and helplessness. From standing together in hardship to drifting apart in different directions, the rise and fall of the Durack family hides too many choices made against one's will. After the younger sister takes their mother away, Patsy and his wife also set off on a new journey. After several weeks of travel, they finally arrive in the southwestern region of Australia. The temporary tents built by their sons display a banner written in Irish Gaelic, expressing a warm welcome. This perhaps carries a deeper meaning. Although they are far from Ireland, their hearts and their roots still remain there. Soon after, the mother reunites with her two sons after 2 years apart. At this moment, all worries are forgotten, and being together as a family becomes the greatest happiness. At the same time, their old friend Buntamura has found a wife locally and has hired many workers to help run the ranch. But with their father's arrival, the two sons make one thing clear: they do not want him to interfere in any matters related to the land. It feels like a lifetime has passed, as Patsy has become just like his own father, while the personalities of his two sons mirror his younger self. This is a silent foreshadowing buried by time, as the lives of two generations are etched with strikingly similar patterns. Now that he is not allowed to participate in developing the land, he might as well live as a carefree old man and enjoy a peaceful life with his wife. But within Patsy's blood flows a restless spirit that refuses to settle for an ordinary life. As he watches his sons plan the land, the unfulfilled ambitions and his desire for control refuse to fade quietly with time. His wife seems to sense his helplessness as well. If he continues to suppress himself like this, it will eventually take a toll on his health. So Mary approaches their two sons and explains their father's inner struggle, hoping they can find some work for him on this land. However, there was an agreement between father and sons that he would not interfere in the development of the land.
Well, he can't spend the rest of his life weeding cabbages or he will surely die.
In the following days, Patsy encounters a group of road workers on a hillside. He asks the foreman for permission, hoping to join the team. At first, the foreman pretends to refuse, but after seeing Patsy's persistent eagerness, he eventually agrees. The reason the foreman acts this way is because he has been instructed by the two sons, allowing Patsy to believe he earned the job naturally rather than through their deliberate arrangement. When Patsy returns home, he immediately shares the news with his wife, who feels happy for him. Unfortunately, she is quietly enduring a growing pain in her abdomen, choosing not to tell anyone. Meanwhile, misfortune continues to unfold. Since going bankrupt, Patsy's younger brother has been trapped in deep despair, which ultimately worsens his lung illness. As the man reaches the end of his life, his two sisters come to visit him. Perhaps only at the brink of death can one truly see themselves clearly, as he blames his past mistakes. If he had not secretly invested behind his brother's back, perhaps they would still be living in their wealthy mansion. But in this world, there is no such thing as if or perhaps. The time consumed by desire can never be reclaimed, leaving behind only silence and endless regret. On the very next day after his passing, Sarah writes a letter to Patsy at the Kimberley Ranch, delivering the tragic news. But Mary's condition is also deteriorating rapidly, to the point where she can only lie in bed, unable even to stand. They mourn the unfortunate death of the younger brother, while also reflecting on everything that has happened in the past. From their homeland in Ireland to the long journey of immigrating to Australia, the warmth of enduring hardships together and the struggles for survival have now become memories that bring tears, leaving only a deep sense of change and loss. On a clear morning, Mary ultimately cannot escape the fate of death. She quietly gazes at her husband's back as she slowly closes her eyes. This remarkable woman, in a silent farewell, brings her difficult yet resilient life to an end. All her tenderness and endurance are forever frozen in the morning light. After Patsy buries his wife in this land, he spends a long time talking with his old friend Buntamura. They have known each other for 25 years, and that sincere friendship is deeply etched into their bones. Yet even now, Patsy does not know what Buntamura's real name actually is.
You don't even know who I am.
You're Pumpkin, you're my old friend. You're my brother.
Pumpkin. How long have we known each other?
25 years?
25 years. You still don't know my name. My name is Burrican.
When he hears the truth, Patsy cannot stop the tears from streaming down his face. This Indigenous man has been called Buntamura for many years, which was a common practice during the colonial era. When Buntamura finally says, "My name is Barigon," it means he has reclaimed his name, his identity, and his dignity. The reason Patsy cries is first because he finally realizes that the most loyal, kindest, and most trustworthy friend in his life has, all along, been unconsciously treated by him as someone of lower status. On the other hand, Patsy's tears are also for himself, for the immigrant who forgot the pain of his homeland. So the next day, under the watchful eyes of friends and family, he decides to return alone to his old home in Ireland. In the final stage of his life, he seeks to fulfill a wish that has been buried for half a lifetime, to touch the soil of his homeland, to stand before the weathered graves of his ancestors, and to place his remaining days where his dreams first began. With this, the series comes to a complete end. The King of Grass Fortress uses the immigrant epic of the Durack family to expose the brutal paradox of colonial expansion. The scattered moments of conscience throughout the story have long defined the eternal struggle between survival and dignity. Patsy emerges from the Irish famine, and every step he takes toward the Australian dream is balanced on a moral tightrope. He sets the gears of fate in motion with the coins of English merchants, while the prosperity of the ranch is watered with the suffering of Indigenous people. The depth of the story lies in how it fully reveals the hypocrisy of the frontier myth. Patsy repeats his father's obsession with land, yet becomes another layer of oppression himself. When he discovers his sons expanding in the Kimberley with guns, history completes its cruel cycle. The moment Buntamura reveals his true name, Barrigan, marks an awakening of identity, reflecting Patsy's lifelong struggle with the guilt of occupation rather than true belonging. The rise and fall of 3 generations of the family is, in essence, a miniature reflection of colonial history. All wealth is stained with the suffering of others, and every success is accompanied by the erasure of culture. In the end, Patsy's return to Ireland is not a triumphant homecoming, but a sorrowful acceptance of a displaced fate. They have forever become strangers to their homeland, and wanderers in Australia. Alright, thank you everyone for staying with me. I am a film enthusiast, and I will see you in the next episode.